next 2 hours, I'm going to be your host. My name is Matt, Grass Factor Martin. Welcome aboard. Welcome to Turfs Up Radio. This is the only live radio station dedicated to an entire industry that is the green industry, as a matter of fact. And I gotta say, it's pretty cool that I get to come on here and do this literally for 2 hours. So bear with me if I kind of sound like I'm rambling from time to time. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to fill 2 hours of content. But I'm not going to lie, I love hearing myself talk, so, you can fill those voids however you deem necessary. Hope everybody enjoyed their day today. It's 4 o'clock. I know not everybody has a day that's over. I know mine's definitely not. There's definitely still a lot to cover from Monday from our Pick the Doc's Brain segment. There's a lot we did not get to, so I'll be getting to that today. When we were talking about the Barenberg seed trials, somebody actually sent me an image of the individual cultivars. So that'll be exciting. We also had the fine folks from My Soil reached out to me, so I'm going to invite them onto the show. We'll have a special guest where they come on and we talk about the benefits of the ion exchange method. This will be a great learning curve, a learning opportunity for me because I just don't know a lot about it. I do understand a little bit about adsorption. Anyway, I think it would be a great learning opportunity for everybody to learn more about the ion exchange method, which is not something that is as common as like an acid digestion or one of the other methods. I'm not a real chemist. I just play one on the internet. So, it's always fun to speak to people who actually understand real chemistry. One day when I grow up, though, maybe, possibly, I'll be able to take on some rudimentary chemistry. I don't know. So, like I said, we'll be covering some of the leftover stuff from there. You'll have to bear with me. I'm trying to read my screens while I do this, and I mean, I've got this weird thing going on with my eye. I've lost a little bit of vision in my left eye, and I'm going to go find out more about what that's about on Friday. Man, I tell you what, the thing about getting old is that there's not really anything you can do to stop it. You can try and take care of yourself as much as possible. And this is one of those, terrible things is I have a good friend in the industry who's here in the area, the pinnacle of health and suffered a heart attack in his mid 40s. And that's just a difficult, it's a difficult thing, and just as your body ages, you never know what to expect. Chad said, when are you going to get your chemist friend on the show? That's what I'm trying to figure out. She is not in the country right now. When she comes back to the U.S., she said she promised she'd do the show with me, but for the next little period of time, she will be in Israel. So I don't have access yet, but Yeah, that's kind of in the basis. I actually reached out to another chemist, but as you could imagine, some chemists have a personality to be able to come on and have a conversation, and that is definitely Dr. Pearl. And then some people do not have the personality to come on and want to do this. And it's not that they have a poor personality or anything. It's just they're not motivated to come and entertain an audience, so to speak. Even if it would be, me, guiding them through the course of the conversation, it's still not something that interests them at all. So my backup there was definitely a big, hard no on that. So, we'll be patient, and then we'll have Dr. Pearl on, and we'll talk about all kinds of fun things, and that should be exciting. And then, again, in the meantime, on my end, I'm going to have on, like I said, I'm going to invite at least the My Soul people to come on and talk to us about the ion exchange method and where that fits into our program and what we can expect from, and all those fun things, just to try and fill some of the gaps that we may have, maybe on a complete and total understanding about the ion exchange method. I don't know. And then, of course, I always had one of these questions that came in was, let's talk about the use of peat moss as top dressing. We can. I don't know what you want me to talk about it. It's an acidic material. There's not really any NPK analysis to it, but it can retain moisture. So, you can do that. Personally, I have seeded, hundreds, if not thousands of acres of turf and never once used it. It seems to be more of a thing on the internet, more so than in real life. I know lots and lots of companies out there that do absolutely nothing with peat moss. I don't know any golf courses that do anything with peat moss. I don't know any pro turf people that do anything with peat moss. It's a YouTube thing. I guess is really the only way to put it. And that's not to say it's not effective. It is 100% definitely effective. Especially when it comes to water retention and all that, but you have to be careful about the depth of it because you can bury it a little bit too deep and it can get a little squirrely there. But, outside of that, it's totally up to you if you want to spend the money on it. But for me, on the pro side of things, it is not worth the investment because I can get the exact same results without using it. Therefore, I don't feel the need to spend the additional money to achieve the same result that I would get whether I use it or not. Does that make sense? Yeah. There we go. Squirrely counts at 1. We're keeping along that. It was funny. I sent my wife a screenshot too. And as a filler, yeah, great choice there. It's an organic matter. It's going to contain organic carbon. And like I've said before, absolutely love what ProPeat does. I think they're a great company. When, one day I aspire to have the type of manufacturing facility they have, I think it's fantastic. And I like what they're doing. It's a different product than I personally would want to work with, but it has nothing to do without the efficacy of that product. I think it's plenty effective. And why it would be something that I wouldn't want to use is that I don't like potassium chloride. So there we go. And as far as the Anuvia product, if you look, I have the very first YouTube video on Anuvia. If you type in the Grass Factor and Anuvia, you'll see my whole video of it. It's another fantastic product that I like. The one hiccup there is that you're limited only to that 16:1:2 analysis. So if you need more potassium, you're kind of up a creek. And then also it's derived from biosolids. And if you're trying to stay away from biosolids, you have no way to get around that. So, but yeah, if you type in the Grass Factor Anuvia, you'll see many years ago, I guess it's been 3-4 years ago or something, I did an interview with one of the most awesome people I know, who is one of the higher ups at Anuvia. And yeah, so absolutely love what they do. You want to talk about something revolutionary? Their manufacturing process that they brought to the table was just unbelievable. So what they do is they take in food waste, or instead of companies like Disney having to landfill their waste, whether it be human waste or food waste or whatever the case may be, they can run it through a reclamation type system, where they feed it through like a natural wastewater facility like your local municipality runs. They basically put the same thing on the back end of Disney, bring in that material, run it through a wastewater facility, convert that into clean, usable water, and then the leftover digested material, they bring that in, put it in these huge hydrolysis tanks, fill them with sulfuric acid, and then inject anhydrous ammonia into it. So you get this unique homogenized ammonium sulfate biosolid prill that forms, and so that's what you get. And so totally cool. Aldo posted a link to me talking about that video there, and there you go. And then a couple questions here said, full renovation spray glyphosate, then use tenacity seeding. Does glyphosate kill all those years of POA seeds that have been dropped? No, they do not. So no matter what, I've got to use a pre-emergent, invite the overseeding, pre-emergent timing thing. Potentially, yes, or you maintain enough turf density that you're not having to deal with POA. And then the second piece of it, though, is that are you dealing with POA annua or POA trivialis? Because if you have POA trivialis, that's perennial. It's going to come back year after year. So no matter what pre-emergent you use, you're not going to do anything to get rid of it. You have to kill it post-emergently first before you can pre-emergently keep it from moving into an area. So there you go. Yes. And this is one actually I will probably save for Green Doc specifically, but we have talked about this a little bit off and on. And it said in Central Florida, 9,500 square feet of Xeon zoysia, but it's sparse in the shade. Your thoughts on putting down PGR before the weather cools, and what is the latest cutoff for Central Florida? Also, when I cut random pieces of sod and pull up, I have minimum root attachment below the sod level into the soil. How well does this need to be rooted to apply PGR this season? Would really like to get something down before the growth slows, but don't want to damage anything. And this is one of those things where I don't think there is a definitive answer on what to do. The only thing you can really do is just experiment. Totally just experiment. So, and in my opinion, I would say just run with it. If you think it may be a good fit, and I think it might be, it would totally be something worth experimenting on, that I would say just totally go for it and give it a whirl and see what ends up happening. The shutdown on that as far as a cutoff would be obviously if it's completely dormant or frozen, because you're going to rely on foliar absorption of something like Trinax Pacethyl. So if you still have foliar absorption you still have the temperatures even for foliar absorption, as you start getting down into the 40s and that stuff, and growth is completely eroded away, then there's not really any reason to do it because you're not actively growing. Therefore, there's no reason to apply a growth regulator. If you're not actively growing and you apply a growth regulator, then you're just literally spraying dollars for zero reason. And that gets to be a problem because you're applying a pesticide or a growth regulator for no real reason other than, I don't know, I just wanted to go spray something. And sometimes I get it. That's okay. If you absolutely feel the need to go do that, you don't care about wasting the money. But the other instance too is, are you creating more of a problem long-term than you are short-term? And if somebody were watching you doing that, say for instance, someone belonged to the local Department of Agriculture and they saw you doing that and they started asking you questions about it, and you said, I don't know, I just wanted to spray something, so I went ahead and sprayed it. And they're like, well, you chose something that is an actual chemical, or you have one of those neighbors that may say that. It just gets to be a bad look. So as long as you're actively growing, I feel like it's fine to go ahead and apply. But if you're no longer actively growing, I feel like that becomes irresponsible at that point. So that would be kind of my recommendation there. As far as how well does it need to be rooted before you apply PGR, not really anything you need to be concerned about. if it's got a cut on, and if it's not rooting, there's probably a little bit of an issue there that I would look at trying to figure out what is going on. Why is it not rooting real well? Especially since it's been in for almost a year and it's not rooting. That leaves me a little bit worried. There's something bigger at play. I don't know what kind of shade, what's causing the shade, what kind of tree it is. Are you dealing with walnut trees, and maybe you're dealing with excessive juglone in the soil? What exactly is it that's causing that problem? Have you pulled a soil test and you're extremely I don't know deficient in one nutrient or something, or way over the top excessive in another nutrient or something? All of those are possibilities, and so it would be important to try and figure that out. And how can you leverage the rest of what you do NPK related wise to mitigate some of those other extenuating circumstances that may be causing problems in the short term? Just something to consider. Brian, at the start of the show, I talked about we're going to take a look at those individual cultivars from Barenberg. And like I said before, the big thing that I will say, that just looking at those and then looking at the NTEP trials, is we're probably going to have to go way back, because the current NTEP trials that you see from Barenberg, all of those are going to be research varieties. So they're going to be initialed out as like FO1224G or something. That's how you'll see it listed in the NTEP trial. So if you go back to the old ones, those cultivars may not have existed yet. Therefore, it's hard to see how it scored on the NTEP trial. So we'll do the best we can and see what we end up unpacking there, but I can't make any real promises. So real quick, let me take a break, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and get this bad boy Smurfing show under the way. You're listening to Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Hey everybody, this is Hecubus from the Nightcap. I'm just sitting here relaxing within the vault with my friends and a tasty, tasty pint. You should stop by and listen in sometime. I'm here every Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, live only on Turfs Up Radio. Your industry, your station.
Every Wednesday night.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is?
Hump Night with The Duck. 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern. Only on Turfs Up Radio.
Hump day?
We have to put up with this?
The Rock! The hot place!
You're not the top.
Did I say something wrong?
The Duck. On Turfs Up Radio. Turfs Up Radio. Your industry, your station.
Are you a military family with a spouse on deployment away from home? Did you know that nonprofit Project Evergreen has thousands of volunteers across the country ready to help military families with lawn, landscape, and snow removal services? We call it Green Care and Snow Care for troops. If you are a military family and would like to receive this free service, or if you'd like to volunteer to help, visit projectevergreen.org. Project Evergreen, creating a greener, healthier, cooler Earth, 1 yard at a time.
Hey, landscape pros, are you tired of digging through rocks and roots and breaking shovels in the process? Then it's time you checked out the GeoRipper 616. It's a landscaper's dream with the Makita 6 Series 2-cycle engine producing over 4 horsepower of raw performance. The 616 digs deep in up to 16 inches of the toughest soils. Lighting, landscape, and irrigation contractors already love this improved lightweight trencher with its ability to get in and get out faster, easier, and with less ground disturbance. And you will too. This redesigned GeoRipper 616 comes with 2 heavy-duty digging chains and a whole mess of helpful extras. To learn more about the GeoRipper and how it can help you out in the field, visit georipper.com today.
We are back. And this is kind of an interesting question here. And I think this is something that needs to be talked about because it's one of those things that I feel like people make changes and they feel good about it in the short term, but they're not exactly sure why they started inducing the types of results that they started seeing. And the question is diversifying your fertility program. And why I think this is interesting is I notice a lot of people get into a routine of applying the same fertilizers at certain times of the year, and then they switch it up. They try a new product, they bring it in, and they swear they have better results. Everybody agrees. The customers agree, the technicians agree, whatever the case may be, everybody's in agreement that whatever took place, whatever happened, something positive is happening. So the question becomes is, over the years, should we diversify our fertility program? Now, let me quantify why that likely takes place. Depending on how you are delivering the nutrients, depending on which derived from statements you are, what derivatives of nutrients you're applying, are all going to elicit slightly different variables in terms of response from the plant. I'll give you an example. If you are going out every year with a 13-13-13 and it's derived from urea, DAP, and potassium chloride, and all of a sudden you switch to a 24-4-8 that is derived from polymer-coated urea, sulfur-coated urea, ammonium sulfate, MAP, and sulfate of potash, I promise you, you are going to see a different result. And the question then becomes why? I'm applying less phosphorus, less potassium, more nitrogen, but I'm seeing a way significantly stronger result out of this 24-4-8 versus my 13-13-13 I was applying. Why would that be? Now, there's a couple of things to consider there and to take into consideration when you're putting together these products. You know, I have been a big advocate since I got into this whole thing, and you start, and it happened really soon. I can remember when I came to the realization that, okay, 100% of urea is a 46OL, 100% of ammonium sulfate is a 21OO, 100% of potassium chloride is a 0060, 100% of MAP is an 11520, MAP, monoammonium phosphate. And when I go through and I started putting these together, and I know I'm targeting a 13-13-13, then you're like, oh, wow. I need roughly 25% of urea. I need, roughly 20. I'm just throwing numbers out there. 25% of MAP, and I need roughly 25% of or less. I need what would that be? 10, 20? Yeah, roughly 25% of potassium chloride. So I've got 75% of my bag being utilized by usable nutrients, and I've got 25% of what is it? And then you start looking into it and you start figuring out, well, a lot of times this is ground rocks, right? Rocks that are ground and then screened into a certain size. And that's what's used as filler material to maintain bulk density of the product. And you try and use that to match up with the bulk density of the other products, right? Because if you're running one product that's a 90 pounds per cubic foot, like you say you're using gypsum or something as a filler, well, the bulk density in that's going to be 90 pounds per cubic foot or 100 pounds per cubic foot. That's a very dense material. And if it's in a bag and it's vibrating, like riding around in the back of your truck, it may settle to the bottom of your bag, right? And so you got to be careful what you choose in there. And this is where kind of the art of fertilizer blending, the art of fertilizer formulating comes together, right? You have to make sure everything, when you spread it, you have even distribution. Everything's going to go about the same distance, right? If you have higher bulk density, chances are it may go further than something that, you may be running like an organic matter source that's only at 30 pounds per cubic foot. And so the trick on the organic matter source is like, okay, if that's 30 pounds per cubic foot, what do I do from a manufacturing standpoint to bring that bulk density up to 50 pounds a cubic foot to make it match something closer to urea, which is 46 pounds a cubic foot? You see, it starts getting real complicated, and it kind of sends you down a wormhole of all that, right? And it was then when I realized how much of the bag of fertilizer was relatively unused. And so it was then I took it upon myself, if at all possible, to have complete and total, utter control over what went into my fertilizers to maximize each and every unit of space within that bag. And so when we talk about diversifying your fertilizer program, this is where, why that's important is when we look at that triple 13, right? We look at that triple 13. And, we're utilizing 75% of the bag. There's a lot there that we could still do with it that is going to elicit a slightly different visual response out of the plant. Even though we may be applying less of something, we can still apply enough of something to still get that added benefit of performance that may give us a bit of a visual difference, albeit slightly, but enough of a visual difference that people start approaching you and saying, this is the best it's ever looked. Or your technicians are out treating lawns and they say, wow, this is doing better than it was last year. What has changed? Why is this so different? Maybe I need to diversify my fertilizer program. Well, really, at the end of the day, the one part that is non-negotiable over the whole thing is that you still have to be agronomically sound. If you begin to violate the rules of agronomy, you're eventually going to lose. It will catch up with you, and you will cause more problems than you actually solve in terms of the issues you may be facing, right? So it all begins with sound agronomy. However you choose to get there is however you choose to get there. In certain scenarios, the input you choose will have a bigger visual impact on what you do than if you just went with what you were traditionally doing. So when I gave the example of that 2408, when you have to run a granular and you chose two different methods of slow release, that kind of gives you a backup in a certain scenario there, right? And when we talk about mitigating surge growth and all that fun stuff, well, if you have two different methods of slow release, if it does get damaged in any form or fashion, one may be able to handle the wear and tear and stress that may come with transporting a material and throwing bags on the back of your truck, or being run over as you're spreading across the lawn out of your permagreen, or whatever the case may be. And then also on the second piece is that you've got a mixture of a slow release and you got a mixture of a quick release. But then you did something a little bit different. So you've got the slow release component, and you're using two different slow release components, which is going to be different on the front end. That should give you a bit more duration than what you're actually used to. Then the second piece of it is that you still have your regular quick release program, and then the actual here where you get funky with your four different derivatives of nitrogen is now you've included ammonium sulfate on it, and it can be a relatively small amount, but now all of a sudden you've got ammonium sulfate in it. And in this instance, you're able to capitalize on both ammoniacal nitrogen, but also the sulfate portion of it. And as we all know, that higher sulfate tissue levels tend to correlate with higher tissue levels of both iron and manganese. Thus, a bit of a darker shade of green, even though you're still only applying nitrogen. Well, not really, because you're applying nitrogen in an ammoniacal form and also a sulfate, right? And we know sulfate does not affect pH. Ammoniacal nitrogen does, but sulfate does not affect pH, but it does induce a bit of a color response, especially when coincided with ammoniacal nitrogen. Then as you switch from DAP to MAP, you may be in a situation where you have a soil pH of a 7. And all of a sudden you have a bit more bioavailability out of that product in the short term because of MAP's ability to protect the phosphorus in an acid. And because of that, you get a bit faster uptake on the phosphorus on the front end. Therefore, complementing the rest of the nitrogen that made its way into the plant and the additional sulfur, you also have the additional phosphorus there, faster available, thus giving you a bit of a quicker response time. And because everything's operating so efficiently, you may also have a bit of a darker green or color for it. Then the last piece of it is that you chose to go with sulfate of potash instead of muriate of potash. So you're dealing with a product that is a lower salt index. And because of this, you may not experience as much desiccation out of the plant. Desiccation meaning loss of water through the leaves. And because of that, holding on to that water, a bit more succulence and a bit more color as a result. So all of a sudden, you moved into something that is still agronomically sound, applying it as a 24-4-8, but you have diversified your inputs to match the specific needs of your plant on your giving area and used every trick you have available to you in order to maximize that visual impact that you may not have been getting before. So did you actually need to change anything you were doing? Maybe, maybe not. Yes, in this instance, yes, you did, and you did get a better result, but it was because you were employing smarter decisions over your individual inputs when you chose to apply a product. At the end of the day, remember, the plant doesn't know the difference between N, P, and K. But remember, the N, P, and K you apply can cause a difference out of your plant. Does that make sense? Is that too far off into the weeds, or does that make sense? And I see this happen often, right? And there's multiple ways to skin a cat, right? There's multiple ways to skin a cat. That may be an application, if you're choosing something like that, to fit on a 6 to 8 week application interval. If you plan on being out there in 2 more weeks, that is not necessarily the product you need to be running. If you plan on being back out there within 2 to 4 weeks, you can totally switch that up, right? You could be applying a little bit of ammonium sulfate, knock down the amount that you're applying in there. You can continue to run MAP and run SOP, and you're going to have nearly identical results. Remember, you chose in there the ammonium sulfate urea, polymer coated, and sulfur coated to try, and you chose the polymer coated and the sulfur coated because that's going to be what you have available that you could choose from as you were putting together this product to be able to give you the duration over the application interval you're looking for. But if you're only going to be out there every 2 weeks, you can still elicit the same visual response you're going for out of that product to feel really good about it, to maximize that value by going with, in this instance, you could just go with a little bit of ammonium sulfate, MAP, and sulfate of potash. But remember, as you're running a more and more quick release product, you want to back that rate down so you have a little bit more control of. Remember, we were talking about surge growth, to be able to manipulate the growth of the plant by backing your rate down. Because remember, in the same window, you may be applying 3 applications, where before you were on an application window where you're only going to be making 1 application. So if you're going to be making 3 applications, you back that rate down by a third to manage your growth over that same window. So in that instance, yes, you did. You diversified what you were doing pretty significantly, actually. And you chose individual inputs based on the conditions that you were looking for. At the end of the day, the plant doesn't know what you did differently. The only thing the plant knows was that it had everything it needed, and it just occurred in different forms that allowed the plant to do things a little bit differently. In this instance, a little bit of additional sulfate, a little bit lower salt index on the products, all coming back to provide a bit of a positive towards the plant, and thus why you see something that may feel differently, something that may feel better, something that looks better, something that may be a hair longer green in the face of heat stress. Like, that's strange. I show up and you're driving down the neighborhood, and you're going down the neighborhood, you're getting that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach because you're like, man, all these yards are going dormant. I don't know what to do. And then you show up to yours and it hasn't gone fully dormant yet. And all of a sudden you're like, oh man, What's going on here? And you can tell it's on its way out, but it's not near where the other yards are. And you start wondering, and you're going back behind what you're doing. And what did I do? What did I do? I got an extra 7 days. I got an extra 10 days before I went dormant as they did. What did I do differently? And those are some of those things you can do differently to maximize that on the back end. But here's the caveat. If you sacrifice agronomy, it doesn't matter if you choose the correct products. You'll be right in the same boat as kind of just nature would dictate on its own. Because you're not doing anything to give the plant a fighting chance against the inevitable of nature. So, for instance, if you were going out with just a 1300 or just a 2100 or just an 1800, whatever the case may be, if you're going out with something like that, you're not covering your bases as far as agronomy is concerned. Assuming you do not have excess phosphorus and potassium in the soil. If you do, you might be able to get away with it. Maybe. And you just apply it there. Remember, as turf managers, we are doing everything we can to give the plant a fighting chance beyond the limits of nature. That is our ultimate goal. How can we maximize the strength of the plant to exist in a state beyond what is normal for nature? That's why at the end of the day, we will never win the war, but can we win individual battles? And sometimes winning the individual battle is eking out those 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 days of green grass when everybody else fails. That is a victory. Those are victories. Being able to keep a golf green alive when it's 104 degrees outside and it's bent grass. Yes, it may go fully dormant. Yes, it may lose all of its color. Yes, it may not look very appealing, but it did not die. And how was I able to keep that from dying? Because in any other circumstance, this plant would have failed and died maintaining it at 100,000ths of an inch. But mine didn't. How? It's because we employed agronomy as turf managers to give the plant its best chance of success in the face of an unnatural stressor. So it is a good thing to diversify your program, but remember, diversify your program based on the conditions, the upcoming conditions. Remember, you're not making an application for what the lawn needs are now. You're making an application right now to prepare for what's coming over the next 6 or 8 weeks, or whatever your application interval is. If you're applying now and you plan on being back on it in 2 weeks, you're applying everything you need now that 2 weeks from now, when you show up to make that next application, the lawn is in better condition than it was previously 2 weeks prior. And then when you make that next application in 2 weeks and you know you're not going to be on it for 4 weeks, you're doing everything you need at that time frame to make sure it is going to have its best foot forward 4 weeks from now. That is really what it's all about. Making the appropriate decision now so when you're back later, you're not taking 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards. If you ever feel like you're in that scenario where you are taking 2 steps forward, 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards, it's important to slow down and reevaluate what you're doing and get a full picture of what's actually going on. The guessing game is only so effective. And trust me, I have done more guessing than anybody out there. It's kind of the beautiful thing that when you're out treating lawns for 10, 11, 12 years, whatever the case may be, and you have full reign to kind of play here and there, you do a lot of it. You get bored. You're always chasing, is the grass greener on the other side of the fence, and you're willing to do whatever it takes. But if you don't have that flexibility, and if you don't have those set aside acreage to be able to do those types of things, don't guess. Develop the data set you need to make sure you're making the accurate decisions out there. And remember that if you are going to guess, what's most important, the one rule you have to follow whenever you're making a guess is to follow the rule of agronomy first. Then the impact of your guesses are no longer as extreme. Risk mitigation is a very real thing when you are in an industry that is high risk, high reward. When and where you can cut risk, that is. Real quick, I got to take a break. When we come back, let's keep on going. I'm having a good time. You're listening to Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station. Oh, guess what? It's Hump Night with the Duck.
Every Wednesday night.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is?
Hump Night with the Duck. 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern. Only on Turfs Up Radio.
Hump day?
We have to put up with this?
The Rock! The hard place!
You're not the top.
Did I say something wrong?
The Duck. On Turfs Up Radio. Turfs Up Radio. Your industry, your station.
Hey everybody, this is Hecubus from the Nightcap. I'm just sitting here relaxing within the vault with my friends and a tasty, tasty pint. You should stop by and listen in sometime. I'm here every Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, live only on Turfs Up Radio. Your industry, your station.
Hey, landscape pros, are you tired of digging through rocks and roots and breaking shovels in the process? Then it's time you checked out the Geo Ripper 616. It's a landscaper's dream with the Makita 6 Series 2-cycle engine producing over 4 horsepower of raw performance. The 616 digs deep in up to 16 inches of the toughest soils. Lighting, landscape, and irrigation contractors already love this improved lightweight trencher with its ability to get in and get out faster, easier, and with less ground disturbance. And you will too. This redesigned Geo Ripper 616 comes with 2 heavy-duty digging chains and a whole mess of helpful extras. To learn more about the Geo Ripper and how it can help you out in the field, visit georipper.com today.
Hey Turfs Up Radio fans, do you know what time it is? That's right, it's time for Turfs Up Radio. Now you can catch us streaming live 24/7 with pro talk, pro tips, and pro interviews. Simply visit turfsupradio.com.
This is pretty interesting here. Okay. A little bit of a diversion here. But Ryan, the Sports Turf King, jumped in and said, hot take in the sports world today. NFL players say they want the league to convert all fields to grass. No more synthetic, saying synthetic turf is unsafe. Boy, there's a lot to kind of unpack there, and I can only talk about this from the standpoint of what I know, which is limited. This is just some of the back end stuff I've seen taking place at University of Tennessee, who's conducting a massive multi-year synthetic turf safety study. And I want to say Nike was the sponsor of it. And we're talking about massive millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars being put into this, of understanding the different types of synthetic turf, safety spectrums on it as far as like concussion probability, leg probabilities, and all kinds of different safety aspects, right? And then comparing it against a sand-based natural turf and then a native soil natural turf. And in terms of injury potential, your highest has been to date, as far as the information I have, is that you have the highest injury potential with synthetic turf. Then with natural grass and native turf being second, and then the absolute lowest being natural grass on sand, on a sand-based growing system. So it doesn't surprise me that this is happening, and I wondered why you never heard more input from the players, because I feel like it should be the players who make the determination over the playing surface that they want to play on. Really what makes the game go round is meeting the demands of the players in certain instances, right? And I feel like the playing surface there, they have the best understanding of what is working for them and what isn't working for them. And it obviously takes time, so I understand the need for experimentation and try it on different surfaces and see which one plays best. And so now that there has been a data set over many, many, many years, over a decade now, we've had all these artificial surfaces to be played on, that the ruling is in, the decision making is in, is that, well, we had fun, but let's stop playing games and get down to brass tacks. And the one that actually is working for us is natural grass. So I'm sure turf managers out there everywhere are high-fiving for what they already knew to be true, right? And it's not to say that there isn't a place for artificial. It's just I don't know where it is. I'm sure maybe somewhere there is an application for it. Maybe if you have water restrictions or whatever the case may be. I don't know what that is, because I don't have to deal with water restrictions. I live in a very water-abundant area. Obviously I'm not in the desert. I'm not in coastal California. It's beyond me. It's not what I have to deal with. So I don't know what the right answer is there. I'm not even qualified to give an opinion in that type of scenario. So, but what I do know is, at least where I am on the eastern seaboard, on the eastern half of the Mississippi, for the majority of places here, is that you're going to get ample rain to be able to support a natural playing surface. And in my opinion, that would be the way to go. For whatever my qualifications are, I don't know. You can tell me I'm a lunatic for that, and I'm perfectly okay with it. Perfectly okay. So it will be interesting to see how this develops. And Ryan, exactly as you stated here, the Haslams here in the state of Tennessee gave significant amounts of money to the local school season to try and not to try, but actually did convert a lot of the public high schools over to synthetic turfs under the guise that it was going to save money in the long run. And I would argue that not a chance in hell would that be saving money in the long run. First, you have the upfront cost for installation, and then the management year over year after that, right? So how many years of playability do you have to have? And we'll set a standard budget of, listen, if you have $10,000 a year to maintain an athletic field, that is pretty, like, that is great. Like, you've got a healthy budget there that gives you some flexibility. Realistically, normally what you're trying to do is leverage the boosters to put up some sort of cash to at least pay the materials, and then you're out working, hawking. The head football coach is out there trying to hawk somebody to either donate material, donate time, or donate effort, labor, whatever the case may be, to mow the fields and so on and so forth. Because the budgets aren't there. They may realistically have a budget of half that. So we'll say the number is $6,000 a year, right? And it cost $100,000. I know that's about what it cost here for each one of these to be installed. Was somewhere, I think it was a base floor of like $80,000 to install a field. And then you had to decide that, did you want just the playing surface artificial, or did you want to go everywhere within the track as an artificial surface? And if you did that, then all of a sudden you're at $130,000, $140,000, $150,000. And then there was other things you wanted to do too. You know, did you want it? I can't remember what all the upsells were, but you could go all the way up in terms of massive amounts of cost. Ryan's giving me here, the statistic is typically it's about $400,000 to $450,000 more for synthetic turf versus grass in total ownership cost for a 10-year lifespan. And to me, that sounds about right. Because eventually, through exposure to sun, wear that takes place, top dressing of crumb rubber, brushing, disinfectants, all of these things start to add up. Plus the initial installation cost, right? That is a massive undertaking, a massive investment. Versus if you came in and you have to sprig, we'll say you spend $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 to sprig a couple of acres, and then you're probably spending the same amount in water and fertilizer to get it going. You know, so now all of a sudden you've got $20,000, $30,000, maybe $40,000 on the installation cost. You've already saved 33%. And then in terms of maintenance costs over that, you got to mow the damn thing and you got to fertilize it and you got to water it. So what does that end up costing over a period? It can be done pretty affordably. You would be shocked at how tight of a budget and how many of these parents want their kids playing on a nice ass field, especially when the parents know that the likelihood of their children being hurt could cause serious problems down the road in terms of financial stability, in terms of paying for college or whatever the case may be. Parents want their kids to have access to nice facilities, and they're willing to put as much money or at least effort into raising money to keep them nice. I've seen it happen all over the place here, not just thousands of instances because I haven't been that involved with it, but I have. I think about the two schools I spent the most time with here locally in Knoxville, and I mean, they worked their ass off to either do the work themselves or to try to convince people that it would be a good ROI, or at least, damn it, they'll sleep better at night knowing they help give these kids an opportunity to play on something nice. So in my opinion, this push for artificial is asinine. It's insane. And then when you start taking into account, so first you've got the original idea of cost savings taking place. That's been debunked. Then you take into account player safety. I do not see why anybody would opt to go this way. To me, it is just insanity. But who am I? I'm just a grass nerd on the radio. It's not my decision. These are not my dollars. And of course, this is my industry. I opt and choose to defend in all cases. But when it comes down to dollars and cents and lives, to me, it does not make sense to gamble on that aspect of it. Maybe it's because I don't have the level of financial freedom that some of these other institutions do. Maybe it's because, I don't know, I'm more empathetic than these other institutions are. Whatever the case may be, I find myself on the other end of the argument purely from a logic standpoint. And logic, as we all know, doesn't always win, right? So kind of an odd thing, and who knows how that will shake out, but it's definitely something I will pay attention to, even though I don't really pay attention to much of the professional sports anyway. We all know I'm an SEC guy. Let's see. Where was I? I had a couple other questions here. And telling me to blink. Somebody said, I'm going to apply a second application of Dithapir. I'm also going to apply a granular application of urea at a half pound to N. Is there a risk that I'm going to blow up? No, that is definitely not going to blow up. Does SiteOne typically have a decent deal on ammonium sulfate? It depends on individual locations. Some of them do not carry it at all. They're not going to stock it because nobody comes in and asks for it. And you may come in and ask for it, but really they have to think about it in terms of volume. What is their closest location that's going to have it? What's it going to cost to move it from that location to this location? And, if they're not moving multiple pallets in and they don't have anybody else that's going to buy it, then the chances are they're not going to carry it. I know it's very, very difficult to get it, at least where I am in Knoxville. So, yeah. Have you seen the Raiders' new turf on that movable platform that grows outside and rolls in for games? That's pretty slick. Yeah, and the advances that are occurring in turf management right now. I know Sorokin's been involved. Dr. Sorokin here at University of Tennessee has been involved in these new types of playing surfaces where they're grown in different types of containers and brought in to be able to have a ready-to-play surface. I mean, it's just the technological advances that are occurring out there are becoming greater and greater and greater. It's just I just don't see the allure to artificial turf. It just, in my opinion, is relatively repulsive. And then you want to take into account the heat these things generate. When you're talking about a playing surface that's at 140, 150 degrees Fahrenheit, I mean, who wants to be on that? Who wants to be on that? Nobody wants to be on that. And here you got high school kids out there, running two-a-days in the mornings and in the afternoon when you got a playing surface that is melting hot. That's insanity. I just, I don't like it. It bothers me. It really does bother me. So let's see here. Boy, this is kind of interesting here. I'm gonna have to go back to that because that is really long, and I don't feel like going through it. Okay, so these cultivars that were in the RTF variety of the Barenberg. So we have Thor tall fescue, Barabusto tall fescue, Bear Repair tall fescue, and Barmesh tall fescue, all of these being rhizomatic tall fescues. So, and then the second piece of this is that it also contains an other crop seed, and this other crop is, it contains roughly 0.03%, which would shock you at how much that is, but it is actually annual ryegrass. Well, it just says ryegrass. It may be perennial rye. It doesn't specify. But boy, I tell you what, that really chaps my ass. I don't know. But this was not my choice to apply this, so I haven't, and someone else did, so I'll let them deal with it as they wish. So, and they were talking about the NTEP trials, right? And so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a quick Google search of Thor tall fescue, and the first one I pulled up here. Wait, let me do this. So we find Thor being run in the, this would be through The 2017 data in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And as part of the, what is this? Percent green cover, August 21st through October 19th. So through a drought period. We had roughly between 76% to 52% coverage. Compared to some of the that actually did really well compared to some of the other varieties. So we have like Supersonic in here. We had Titanium 2 LS is going to be around 56%. The other's around 55%. This was at 58.3. And does it have a mean rating for this? Oh, and then they ranked it by the amount of water used to. This actually contains all the varieties here, and the amount of water used to keep it green. So it was actually very. It required 55 millimeters of water versus Titanium 2 LS, which requires 72 millimeters of water applied. The Barabusto requires 76 millimeters of water. All right, let's see where else we see this mentioned. Percent green cover and other ratings of tall fescue cultivars in the 2016 cool season water use drought tolerance test using Approach 1 rainout shelters at West Lafayette, Indiana. So they rated Thor as having a genetic color of 8.0, and that was good, especially when you compared it to like Thunderstruck, which also had an 8.0, or Kingdom, which also had an 8.0. And we see, it just gives all these quality ratings here. So now I think the part that I mentioned about having to look at older data, that was the missing piece. And when you're trying to figure this out, you have to go deeper, a little further back into the testing. So all of this is 2017 data. This is part of the 2017 report. Let's see. This is still part of the green cover. My goodness. This seems to be the main one they did. Okay. Now, yep. That was where they tested it. Now, Rutgers also has another one here on Thor. Yep. These are just pulled directly from the NTEP. Let me see where it's mentioned here. Had a turf quality average in 2015 at Rutgers of a 4.8 and an establishment score of September of 2015 of a 6. Some of the others, like Michelangelo, had a 5, which is above, and then had a 7.7, which was also above. And then you'll have some that were lower, like Regenerate. Regenerate had a 4.7, but it was higher on the others, a 6.3. Falcon 4 scored a little bit higher, had a 4.8 as far as turf quality, but had a higher establishment score. And it ranked somewhere around middle of the pack. So I'm looking at 100 different varieties, and they literally threw it right in the middle of 50. Let's see if I can find another one here. Barabusto Tall Fescue. Barabusto Tall Fescue. Let me do this. Okay, so if you want to learn more about Barabusto Tall Fescue, you have to go all the way back from the 2000 to 2002, 2005 to find anything about it. It had a good genetic color rating. It did well in the Southwest region. It did not very good in the Pacific region in terms of quality, but it did well in Georgia in the transition zone. It had a decent winter color rating. It had a decent fall color rating. It was in Blacksburg, Virginia. It did fairly well in terms of brown patch resistance. It was definitely not perfect. So I want to give you that it only scored a 7.4 out of 10. So it was not perfect. And then Pythium Blight, Barabusto, was an 8.4. So it did fair. It did good. It did good. It was not perfect, but it was good against Pythium. So, it may have only had 20% Pythium establishment versus 100% Pythium establishment. So it's out there, but you have to go earlier. You're not going to find it in these later reports. You're going to see it in the old ones. So now we have Bear Repair, Tall Fescue. And let's see what we have here. Now, this is one I do not see in any of the latest INTEP trials. So chances are this is still in a research, under a research name, or this is a rebranded variety that is already out there. Let's see. And then we had Bar Mesh. Let's look at this. This is another one that has not been evaluated on the INTEP, and if it is out there, this is either a rebrand of another variety or it is currently in a research state. So there, you've got information on Thorn, you got information on Bar Robusto. You have to go deeper into the INTEP trials, earlier ones, but the other two that you see in here, the Bear Repair and the Bar Mesh, there's no information on because it's probably still under a 1 star and 2 or 3 fluffers. It's probably still in the research phase. Oh boy. Hello, sir. Back on 225, my K level is 108 parts per million. I've applied a cumulative around 100 pounds of an 818 between then and now. Just applied 4 pounds per thousand of X-Star. Would I be well served to apply Stress X with my Carbon X app 45 days after my Renault Overseas? Can I find an SOP locally for purchase? No. In that instance, since you have applied an 818 throughout the duration, that means you have actually been inching your K levels up, so you can pay some of that back by going with just a Carbon X app. There's no real need to apply it also with SOP because you've been building the bank by going 1-to-1 into K ratio. So there you go. Boise State will be upset unless they hit it with mass amounts of Milo to get it to blue up. Boy, I have Boise State with their goofy ass blue field anyway. I mean, it's a little bit silly, but what do you do? All right, real quick, I got to take a break. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll keep on keeping on, see what we can unpack and uncover here. You're listening to Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
This is Ryan Breda giving you today's sports report. The Tampa Bay Lightning were crowned the Stanley Cup champions on Monday night after defeating the Dallas Stars in 6 games. Lightning defenseman Victor Hedman won the Conn Smythe Trophy as the 2020 Stanley Cup Playoffs MVP. This is the first Stanley Cup win for Tampa since 2004. In NFL news now, the Tennessee Titans and Minnesota Vikings have suspended in-person activities after 8 members of the Titans tested positive for the coronavirus. The Titans and Vikings started sending people home from their facilities early Tuesday morning and instructed those not in the building to arrive for a drive-up COVID test. The NFL is still expected to let the 2 teams play in their respective game on Sunday. And lastly, the MLB playoffs started on Tuesday with the American League wildcard game. The NL wildcard games begin on Wednesday. That's it for the sports report. This is Ryan Breda reporting for Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Eric the Turf Teacher Jones. The morning show, Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 a.m. And keeping up with Mr. Jones, Mondays at 6 to 8 p.m. Teaching you life lessons, business strategies, and leadership.
Let's Let's grow together. Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
In the news, Bloomington, Minnesota. The new Power TRX HD snowblowers from Toro are ideal for large lots and driveways and designed with improved power steering capabilities and stability. The 28-inch Power TRX HD commercial snowblower has a wide 28-inch clearing width, and the 32-inch Power TRX HD commercial snowblower covers still more territory with a 32-inch clearing width. Power TRX HD unit features a hydrostatic powered transmission for self-propelled operation, and the track drive grips the surface for stability and traction on tough terrain and slopes. Toro's infinitely variable speed gives the operator total control over the machine's speed and makes it a breeze to change speeds on the go. It's a great solution for homeowners with steep driveways. Driven by Toro's 420cc premium 4-cycle OHV engine, both models have the power and capacity needed to clear the snow, more than 20 inches deep, hurling snow over 60 feet depending on conditions. The one-push electric start lets the operator get right to work, and the power steering ensures smooth, tight turns. Built-in hand warmers and LED headlights help ease the job in the cold, dark conditions. Patented anti-clogging system minimizes clogging and routes heavy snow away from the chute and back into the auger. Heavy-duty cast iron skids with drift cutters help the Power TRX HD snowblowers cut through heavy snow. The quick stick chute control makes changing the deflector direction easy and smooth. With all steel construction and commercial grade quality, both Power TRX HD models are built for years of dependable service and reduced maintenance. More information on Power TRXD snowblowers can be found on Toro's website. I'm Steve Anthony for Turfs Up Radio News.
All right, we're back, and let's see here. There was something I was going to get to here. Okay, so Justin Thomas said, dealing with Bermuda grass in the transition zones of Fort Smith, Arkansas, a little bit cooler area there, a little further up north, experiencing leaf spot fungus and melting out, and has heard to be careful with propiconazole this time of year. Can you please explain the risk of using propiconazole? How long should I wait to see if the application is effective before trying something else? Or should I change to an AI that is systemic, like using azoxystrobin? So, one of the easiest things that I say to do is, so when you're dealing with leaf spot, in NC State created these files called the, the turf files. And you can type in something like NC State and then leaf spot, and it'll give you this great little management method here in terms of, what the symptoms are, and what the development factors are. And this is one of the things you see is leaf spot melting out is one of several helminthosporium diseases which survive in thatch during periods that are unfavorable for disease development. These fungi are most active during periods of cool and wet weather, but some can cause disease whenever temperatures are above freezing. So cool, wet weather, which makes sense this time of year, right? We see a lot of that. So it only makes sense that, yes, you are seeing it now. Now, this is where you have to make the judgment call, right? And this is where I would be saying to myself, okay, how long do I have before Bermuda grass is going dormant? Right now, I don't have much time left. I've got maybe 30 days before I'm starting to undergo dormancy. So should I be applying a fungicide now, knowing in 30, 45 days I'm going to be dormant? In my opinion, no, it doesn't make any sense. Now, if I wasn't going to be going dormant until December, the end of December, maybe even January or February going dormant, then I wouldn't be so worried about it. But and I would go ahead and make an application, right? But right now, if I got I'm this close up to dormancy, then I definitely wouldn't be worried about it. When I talk about the risk associated with propiconazole, I'm talking about the fact that the DMI class of fungicides have growth regulatory effects. And in that same vein, they can also have phytotoxic effects when over-applied. And it's easy to get sucked into a period of allure that you apply a fungicide and you don't see immediate correction this time of year because especially warm season grass in the transition zone, the grass is not actively growing very well. Therefore, if you correct the disease issue, it is not growing out the damage that you see in the turf. So what the thing to get sucked into is that right now I've got leaf spot in my Bermuda grass and I'm pounding it with propiconazole, and it's not getting any better. Well, how fast is it growing right now? Are you cutting it every 2 weeks? Are you cutting it every 3 weeks? And when you are cutting it, are you barely cutting the tips off the grass? If that's the case, then you don't have enough growth to grow out the diseased, damaged leaves. When you apply a fungicide, it's not going to go in and fix individual leaves and make those spots disappear. All of that has to grow out, and then the new leaves that come in and replace the old damaged leaves are no longer infected. So you have to have the growth there to grow out the damaged area. So when I talk about being careful, one, you're dealing with a fungicide that can elicit phytotoxic effects. And so you can continue to pound fungicide on it over and over and over and actually get to the point of applying a phytotoxic effect because you're like, it's not correcting it. It's not getting any better. It's not getting any better. But you don't know it hasn't gotten any better because new grass has not grown in to replace the damaged grass. So it's important to me to make clear, to make the best judgment calls you can. And when you're trying to make those judgment calls, I'm telling you, before you ever apply a fungicide, before you ever apply an insecticide, before you ever apply anything that ends in a pesticide class of products, take into account every variable you may experience. Just because you have input doesn't mean your output is immediately ending with a side, right? So in this instance, your input is visually seeing that you have leaf spot disease, but the output in this scenario is not applying fungicide unless you meet a series of criteria. The series of criteria is the length of time until the grass goes dormant. And I can tell you, you can send your Bermuda grass dormant with leaf spot, no problem. It ain't going to do nothing. It's going to be fine. The second thing into account is that if I do apply a fungicide, do I have enough growth there to even grow out the damage? Do I have the length of time before it goes dormant to make it worth the money spent? Do I have the growth to support applying a fungicide for it to even recover before it goes dormant? Or is it going to recover right as it goes dormant and I never get to experience that period of recovery? In my opinion, those two criteria have to be met before ever choosing to apply that fungicide. If you want to spend the money on it, that's fine. But then when it comes back into a bit of environmental responsibility, I feel like that is the more important piece of the scenario. Because in the event you're ever out there and the neighbor comes up and approaches you and you're like, oh, I see your company out here treating all these lawns. What are you applying? You say, I'm applying a fungicide. And what if that person happens to be a biologist or a PhD agronomist? You don't know. You don't know. And then they start holding your feet to the fire and they're like, why would you ever do that? You've got dormancy coming up in 30 days and it's not going to do anything. What is your education background? Why do you think you're doing this? I'm going to tell everybody in the neighborhood not to use you because you have no idea what you're doing while you're out here. I've seen it happen before more than once. And it is not good to be on the receiving end of that. I'm telling you. You can take my word for it. Do not choose to live through that purely to say you have that experience. It is not a positive one. Luckily, I haven't been too much on the receiving end of that, but I have made mistakes with glyphosate and triclopyr before and smoking out red buds. And I can tell you how that feels, especially when it's the head the head of horticulture at University of Tennessee. It happens, and you got to figure out how to deal with it. But if I would have taken a second longer and decided myself that is the risk to reward ratio in this scenario, I was being risky totally. I had the temperatures. I did not take into account the potential for temperature inversion. If I would have said to myself, you know what, maybe I could back this into 2 applications or maybe do any kind of follow-up that I need to do as a follow-up instead of just being sure that if I get out there and I make 1 application, I'm going to smoke everything here. It was totally my mindset. And it was what I was going to do. And you know why? I'll tell you exactly why I did it. Was because it was under bid. It was under bid. Normally, for that type of project, I would choose to be there, an hour and a half. It wasn't huge, and I can't remember. It was like a couple $100 or something like that. And I got talked into doing it for like $150 or whatever the case may be. And I was mad about it. And so I decided to go risky. And it came back to bite my ass. So, and I know this is not exactly the same thing, but kind of it actually is, because the potential for that is still there, albeit probably much slimmer, but the potential is there. Now, the risk of it is not necessarily there. You're not going to go out and just kill all your Bermuda grass. That's not what I'm saying. But in terms of environmental responsibility, that risk is still there. So in my opinion, in this instance, I would not do anything, and I sure as hell wouldn't be reaching for any kind of systemic product, and I sure as hell wouldn't be reaching for any fungicide whatsoever. I'd be calling it good. Even if the disease sets in and smokes off the top of all that grass, that's fine. That's fine, because it's going to come back next year just as perfectly as if the Helminthosporium was never there. You may see it again in the spring, because remember, what are the conditions that are favorable for the development of Helminthosporium? Cool, wet weather. Welcome to spring in the transition zone. Tony Spinelli says, is there a correlation between high compaction and fungus? I got a client who doesn't believe in aeration and hasn't had it in 5+ years as far as I know, and as long as it's a fungus if it's a state away. His root system is amazing, and he knows how to water to avoid fungus as well. So, this is one of those things. Yes, it can, but depending on where you are, Tony, it doesn't matter what the conditions are. It doesn't matter whether you're aerifying or not. In some instances, the pure cause of it could just be disease pressure. Because I can promise you, I've aerated thousands of acres in my lifetime that have all gotten disease. He knows how to water to avoid fungus, but he continues to get fungus. I feel like there may be a disconnect there between his ability to water and the actual disease. The other piece of it, too, that we're not experiencing, we don't have information on, is what cultivars are we dealing with? You may say he has tall fescue. The hellhole, also known as the transition zone. If I had to guess, you're talking about tall fescue, and it consistently gets brown patch. When you are in the transition zone, it doesn't matter what cultivar tall fescue you have. It doesn't matter if you aerate it. It doesn't matter what kind of watering schedule you have it on. It is not a matter of if you get disease. It is a matter of when you get disease, because it all comes back to right plant, right place being the fundamental aspect over whether or not the conditions for the development of disease are going to exist. The transition zone is that part of the country where there is no right plant for this place. There is none. That's why we tend to have persistent amounts of like leaf spot and Bermuda grass. That's why we have winter kill in Bermuda grass. That's why we have winter kill in zoysia grass. Because we still have weathers that are not conducive for the development for these warm season grasses. And then on the flip side, with tall fescue, when you are trying to manage a grass that checks out psychologically, spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally at 85 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're trying to manage it at 85 days over 85 degrees, then it's all out. That is not the appropriate plant, but it's the best we have. It may be the best we have for this type of scenario. So No, it doesn't matter whether you aerate it or not. It's just going to get brown patch. No matter what fertility program you run, no matter what watering program you run, no matter what aerator you put on it, no matter what biostimulant you put on it, no matter what weed control you use, when, here, there, how you mow it, what kind of mower you use, the weight of your tires, the PSI when you walk across it, whether you walk across it or don't walk across it, whether you mow it in the morning, afternoon, once a week, 6 days a week, once a month, once a year, you are going to get the development of Rhizoctonia solani on that property if you meet the conditions, and the conditions are over 85 during the day and over 65 at night. And if you meet those for 5 days in a row, you are all of a sudden in the disease window. You add humidity to that and kapow! Low nitrogen programs are conducive for the development of brown patch. University of Nebraska at Lincoln and North Carolina State University conducted those tests, and they said that low input programs can contribute to the development of brown patch at the same rate that high input programs run. It doesn't matter what you do, you just have the favorable conditions. Remember, the disease is a disease triangle that you have to meet. And if you're wondering what that looks like, you can type into the search bar the disease triangle. And if you look here, you have to have the environment, the pathogen, and the host. And boy, let me tell you, we are right in the middle of the environment. It does not get any more favorable than where we are right now. I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. North Carolina, Southern Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Southern Indiana, Arkansas, North Mississippi, North Alabama, North Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, wherever you want to go in that area right there, down into Texas and that wherever you want to go. Tall fescue is going. That's why when you look at these INTEP trials, the highest you will ever see on brown patch resistance is a 9. Well, guess what? That means 10% of that patch of fescue still had brown patch. You still had 10% coverage. That's 100 out of 1,000 square feet. 100 square feet of it was brown patch. You may score an 8.3 on Pythium. You may score a 9.4 on Pythium. But that means you still had 600 out of 1,000 square, or you had 60 out of 1,000 square feet. 60 square feet of it was still eat up with Pythium. That is just the nature of dealing with tall fescue. You pick your poison on cool season grass. You put in Kentucky bluegrass here, you're going to be dealing with summer patch. You still got the potential for Missouri. Yeah, it's another one. You still have potential for Pythium. All your cool season grass. You put perennial rye in, you're going to deal with the same thing. Except with perennial rye, you've got an added degree of random death syndrome, which isn't a real disease. It's just something I talk about because it's one of those grasses that just dies in our area for whatever reason. That's why you'll see some people that just plant it and then let it all go because it all just goes for whatever reason. It's just all gone. It's like annual ryegrass, obviously designed to be an annual. You plant it, it just all goes away magically when it gets warm outside. Steve Willie said, could dismiss possibly have a pre-emergent effect on bluegrass seeding? Yes, 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 yes. 100% yes. Sulfentrazone in and of itself will inhibit the germination of seed, the majority of seeds, for approximately 6 weeks. The higher the rate you go, the higher the potential for that 6 week to be even stronger, if not even longer. Sulfentrazone in and of itself is extremely effective at preventing the development of plants. I promise you. And as kind of a trick, You hop on over to the label. It will tell you the reseed interval on it is a minimum of 6 weeks. And that minimum of 6 weeks correlates with that 2 to 4 ounce per acre rate. As you start getting closer to 12 ounces, I promise you, your reseed interval is going to be significantly longer. You could be closer to 3 months. Sulfentrazone is an incredibly powerful herbicide. It's kind of the same thing, and this is one of the things we have to be careful with when we're choosing to go out with something like SurePower now or flumioxazin. Flumioxazin in the other real world is also known as SureGuard. SureGuard, another PPOI, same family of herbicides as sulfentrazone. SureGuard is used as a bare ground pre-emergent. When applied twice a year, provides 365 days of control. Now, albeit in SurePower, you're applying a very, very small amount. But whatever the recommendation is on the reseed interval of that, I would 100% pay close attention to it because of the power of those herbicides. Extremely powerful. And what did Paul say in here? This is funny. Paul said, I've been listening in my headphones while a customer has been babbling at me for 30 minutes. I get it, man. I have done that once or twice over the years as well, too. In fact, if anybody remembers when I had Russell Skipper on, we would be on the phone with each other while we would be talking to customers and all kinds of stuff. And it would be fun because a customer would have a very serious question and we're shouting just horrifically incorrect answers to tell the other person to tell their customer, like if they were asking, what kind of weed is this, and the way they're describing it, you can tell it's nutsedge, and you're screaming at them, Dallas grass or Poa annua or henbit, or tell them it's a dandelion. Tell them it was fun in the moment. So I get it. I appreciate you listening, Paul. I really do. I appreciate you. Let me see here. Actually, real quick, let me do that. Possibly. I'm going to take a break real quick. When we come back, let's keep on powering on. You're listening to Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Hello everyone, this is Abby Lancia with Turfs Up Radio reporting your national weather forecast. Today is Wednesday, September 30th, the last day of September, so let's have a look at that forecast. Most of the states are rain-free today with a few exceptions up in the north. Near the Great Lakes area, we see some rain in the forecast in northern Minnesota and Ohio, and then all of Michigan and Wisconsin. We're also going to see some rain in the northeast region as well as southern Florida, but other than that, all the other states today are staying pretty dry. In the west, we have temperatures about 10 to 15 degrees above average, 74 degrees in Denver today, 85 in Portland, 100 degrees in Sacramento, and then 109 degrees in Palm Springs. Up further in the northeast in Maine, we're seeing temperatures 10 to 15 degrees above average as well. Moving east to the northern plains, we have some cool pockets with temperatures around 59 degrees in Minneapolis, 63 in Chicago, and then in the southeast as well. Pretty pleasant day all around today, 74 in Atlanta and 72 in Raleigh, all with sunny skies. And that is it for today, everybody. This is Abby Lancia with Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station. Have a great day, everyone.
Every Wednesday night.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is?
Hump Night with the Duck. 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern. Only on Turfs Up Radio.
Hump day?
Do we have to put up with this?
The Rock! The hard place!
You're not the top.
Did I say something wrong?
The Duck. On Turfs Up Radio. Turfs Up Radio. Your industry, your station.
Thank you, Abby, for the most accurate weather forecast in all of America right here. I promise you. And this is always a good question. I have the same answer every time. And the question is in the transition zone, what would be your choice of turf type and why? Meyer Z52 Zoysia. Why? Because it is, I know how to maintain it under my style of management. My style of management is different than your style of management. I'll tell you that right now. The way when I talk to other professionals that deal with Zoysia, everybody has their method. Ray likes to maintain it his way and my way. Ray would never want to step foot on any of my Zoysia lawns. I just know he wouldn't, especially if he had to try to get a reel through it. It would be impossible. My management to approaching Zoysia, and this is why I've always struggled with Zeon Zoysia, because it doesn't fit my management style. My management style, I came up, I collected my bearings, I earned my stripes on Meyer Z52 Zoysia. And then I started seeing more like Palisade, and then you start seeing more of these funky varieties. And but for the most part, 90% of the acreage I had to maintain for the first 7-8 years of my career was all Meyer Z52 Zoysia or Emerald Zoysia. And then after a few hard ice storms, we started losing significant amounts of Emerald Zoysia. And it was at no fault of my own. It was just kind of the natural progression of things of tolerating ice storms. Emerald Zoysia just does not like them. I promise you. So, in my management philosophy on that is you do not fiddle fart around with Zoysia, and it will not fiddle fart around with you. Now, where there are caveats there's going to be these newer varieties like Zeon Zoysia. You fiddle fart around with Zeon Zoysia, and it's happy. It doesn't mind. But Meyer Z52, you gotta take it by the reins, and you gotta steer it the direction you want to go. At least that's where I've had the most success with it over the areas of the South that I've managed it. So that's where I like to be with it, and that's how I like to do it, and that's where I've had success with it, and that would be the way I would maintain it, and that would be why I would choose that grass. So that's what I would do. And then the other piece of this, and this is a good question here. So what can I blanket spray on Bermuda to kill King Ranch bluestem and Bahia grass? So simply on the Bahia grass, metsulfuron methyl would be your approach to it. Now, depending on where you are, you say King Ranch bluestem, I immediately think Texas. One of the caveats you have to pay attention to is your soil pH if choosing to use a product like metsulfuron methyl. The other piece of it is, are you dealing with oak trees? Lots of live oaks in Texas. You got to be exceptionally careful around oak trees. The propensity for metsulfuron methyl to cause a problem and end up inadvertently killing oak trees in your property is high, especially if you have high pH. So be careful. Read, reread, know, understand, research as much as you can about that herbicide, metsulfuron methyl, if and when you choose to make that application. Now, the second piece of this, King Ranch bluestem, good luck. There are lots of individual options out there. I'm not sure anything is going to give you a 100% surefire method of killing it. Where I would start with in terms of product selection for that individual weed would be Revolver plus Celsius would be my first application choice in attempting to get rid of it. Now, if I had to take it up a notch, that's probably where I'd be looking at something like the addition of Syncor. Also, I would be considering using one of these new herbicides like Manuscript. And then the other thing you could do too with King Ranch bluestem is wick it. So using a glyphosate wick in this scenario would be easier because it is going to outgrow your Bermuda grass varieties faster, right? And so that would be a scenario in which wicking would be effective. So I hope that helps. I'm trying to think of anything else, but no, I think that pretty much for the most part gets what I needed to get. And let's see here. Mr. Beeman, Patrick Beeman. Wait, what did I do? I lost that. I lost my notes. It's somewhere, I promise you. There it is, Grassmasters in Wilson, North Carolina. Was talking about finishing his fall pre-emergent mid-October, and he was asking about adding 1 quart of Simazine in combination with Spectacle on these properties to try and catch some early post. And in my opinion, Patrick, that's probably the cheapest, most effective way to go about it to give you a fighting chance. I don't know. It's going to be impossible for me to say 100% yes, this is going to be the way to do it, but I feel like that is going to be your best opportunity in providing control in that scenario. Yes, that would be my best guess. Had another question here. It said, how much flexibility is there with grass seed drying out between water cycles? In the heat of the day, I can water, and then 20 minutes later, it's dried out. I can't keep up without making mud. Drying out a little bit is okay, and it's going to be hard for me to say because how do I quantify how dried out your lawn is verbally? It's just hard to say. A little bit of wilt is perfectly okay. You're inducing stress in the plant. You're forcing it to work on its own without handing everything to it on a platter, right? You know, everybody talks about how millennials are soft and they need everything handed to them and all this fun stuff. Well, in the same instance, you don't correct that behavior by handing them everything to them every time they throw a bit of a temper tantrum. So in the same instance where you're dealing with, and I say that because I'm very clearly a millennial, even though I look like I'm 86 years old, I promise I'm 34. So. Which puts me right in the middle of that age group. So in this particular instance, a little bit of stress is a good thing. And normally what I would do is this would be my normal watering schedule during establishment until it was up pretty uniformly. And I'd say it gets to about the inch mark, right? And then I start to shock it. And so I would run 4 to 5 minutes a zone, depending on if I needed to hit a 360 loop on an irrigation head. I would run at 7 a.m., 11 a.m., 3 p.m., 7 p.m., right? So I would get just one quick middle of the day watering right there. And then as it began to get a little height to it, an inch, 2 inches, guess which ones I'm cutting out? I'm cutting out in the middle of the day. And I'm going to build the water bank overnight, say like 10 minutes at night, 10 minutes in the morning. Oh, don't shoot me because I'm putting down water at night in the morning. I'm keeping it wet overnight. But I don't apply any water during the day. Let it completely dry out. Let it get a little wilt. That's the way I did it. That's the way I have success with it. Other people tell me I'm crazy or stupid, and what other people may do is they may avoid the overnight watering altogether and then just apply it once in the morning or once in the middle of the day at 12. Go ahead, get their 10-minute cycle in and let it go. And then whatever ends up happening from there until the next day, you call it good. So however you choose to do it is fine. And just understand a little bit of wilt is perfectly normal. That's acceptable, especially if you're dealing with hotter weather. It's just going to happen. And I promise you would be absolutely stunned at how resilient the grass is to handling that kind of scenario. I have grown in, again, we're going to go back to that whole statistic of thousands of acres. I've grown in thousands of acres of grass without the first inch of irrigation put on it. All done through natural rainwater. Grass, if it can find a way, it will find a way. It is pretty miraculous in that instance. Now, I don't know specifically where you are. You may be dealing with sandier soil than others, and that may be why it's moving through the soil profile, and that may be why that water requirement is that much higher. And so in that instance that you're doing, instead of trying to go for a longer period, well, you're talking about mud. You're not going to be making a whole lot of mud with sand. So that would be kind of my statement on it. That's my suggestion on that. But it's again, without me seeing it, it's going to be hard to say. It's hard to describe in words over radio what is considered acceptable levels of stress and what is not considered acceptable levels of stress. There's a lot of variability in there that is purely a judgment call. And as much as I would love to make judgment calls for people, it's not something I can do online. Unfortunately, there are still technological limits as far as what can and cannot be accomplished online. That is one of them, making judgment calls. So that's actually what I got. All right, real quick, I got to take one more break, and when we come back, let's move into the final segment here and see what we can uncover. You're listening to Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
Every Wednesday night.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is?
Hump Night with The Duck. 7 Pacific, 10 Eastern. Only on Turfs Up Radio.
Hump day?
Do we have to put up with this?
The Rock! The hard place!
You're not the top.
Did I say something wrong?
The Duck. On Turfs Up Radio. Turfs Up Radio. Your industry, your station.
Hey everybody, this is Hecubus from the Nightcap. I'm just sitting here relaxing within the vault with my friends and a tasty, tasty pint. You should stop by and listen in sometime. I'm here every Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, live only on Turfs Up Radio. Your industry, your station.
Hey everybody, it's Brooke Ford, host of The Green Veteran here on Turfs Up Radio. Be sure to check me out every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. You're going to hear some great one-on-one interviews with green industry professionals. We're going to talk about best business practices, highlight innovative products, and also provide some insight into some new emerging technologies in the field. That's The Green Veteran, airing each Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And remember, Turfs Up Radio, your industry, your station.
All right, we're back. So a question here. I had a question come in the other day, and it said, should I cover my grass seed with topsoil or with compost? And I said, as long as you're, what's most important is that you apply a fertilizer that's going to be conducive for the establishment of the grass, right? So if you have a soil test that says you need phosphorus, then you can apply actual phosphorus in that type of scenario. So my statement was that there's absolutely no need whatsoever to cover grass seed. And in fact, certain grass seeds specifically absolutely hate being covered. Bermuda grass, for example. You cover Bermuda grass seed, you'll never see it come up unless you're using a very, very, very fine 1 or 2 grain cover of sand. Will it even come up? If it's pushed down to 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch into the soil, it's not going to come up. It wants to be at the surface. It needs the light. So now the question is, the other day that grass seed can germinate on top of the soil, I'm not getting that concept of how to say get down into the ground and grow roots. So this is what's magical about seed in general, is that as it begins to germinate, the leaf immediately, how it breaks open that seed, it is going to move towards the light. And the roots are going to go where there is water. Your soil holds water. Therefore, your roots are going to move towards the water. And then the leaf, which is looking for sunlight because of photosynthesis, where it's looking to take in sunlight and CO2 and convert that into energy in the plant that can be used to develop more roots to go after more water within the soil. And it creates this beautiful cycle of moving in this direction where you have a leaf going up and you have roots going down. It's an easy thing, and it's an easy thing to just do, right? It's totally just a natural process that through hundreds of years, millions of years of plant development, that it just occurs that way. It's just the way it happens. So under no circumstance ever do you need to cover seed when you're talking about grass seed. Now, when you're talking about maximizing yield, even on corn, one of the things you can do is you can go take a corn seed, and go sit it on top of the ground, and I promise you, and water it, it will eventually come up. Now, if you're trying to get 300 bushel an acre, you may need to plant it at a 1/4 inch depth or an 1/8 of an inch depth. It depends on what you are trying to get out of your plant. You're dealing with grass seed. You're not trying to harvest bushels per acre. You're not trying to get 300 bushel an acre. You're going after the most aesthetic turf possible, and part of that is spending the appropriate amount of money to get there. Otherwise, you are just facing a significant amount of loss or potential for erosion or whatever the case may be. Covering grass seed is one of the, here it is. Covering grass seed is a scam. It is 100% not necessary. Again, going back to that statistic I stated earlier, I have seeded thousands of acres over my career, and never once have I covered seed. It is 100% unnecessary. In the same instance, you don't need... It doesn't. You would be shocked at how loose it needs to be. Bob, I'll tell you an example. One thing you can do. You can go get a wet paper towel and put a seed in it and keep it wet. And I promise you that seed will germinate. It's an amazing thing. If you've never done it, I highly recommend you go do it. There is no seed there. There is no soil there for it to even germinate. There is no soil for it to germinate. And it will germinate. It's an amazing thing. So even if it sits on the surface, on hard pan ground, you would be stunned. Not only will it germinate, the power of that root system to move through that soil and establish a root system and convert that hard pan ground into loose aerified soil is 100% within reason and within expectation of how turf grass works. That's what it does. You do not need to put down additional topsoil. You don't need anything special to have it happen. It is purely and totally able to happen on top of regular hard ground. If you don't believe me, go get a handful of grass seed, put it down on top of the ground. In fact, you could put it in the crack of your driveway. Go put a handful of grass seed in the crack of your driveway and get out there and water it every day. And you would be shocked that it will germinate in the crack of a driveway, send a root in between that ground, and establish a plant in just that sediment that has collected in the crack of the driveway. It's amazing. In fact, if you take a handful of grass seed and you put it in the back of in the tailgate of your truck and let it get rained on, you would be shocked that the grass will actually germinate and root into the other seeds surrounding it, and that will then act as the soil growing medium for that plant to grow. If you've ever heard of hydroponics, hydroponic plants are literally grown in water. It's literally grown in water. There is no soil medium for it to grow on. In fact, they may use like rocks or something for it to establish roots in and just provide structure to the plant. That is it. It's not drawing any nutritive value out of those rocks whatsoever. It is purely there for the standpoint of providing physical upright structure to that plant, which again is another one of those roles the root system plays, right? Is to provide physical structure for the plant. It has this natural ability to just find a way. Plants are living organisms, and they are much stronger than we give them credit for. Another one here says, let's see, what are your thoughts on peptides and their place in turf fertility programs? I didn't even know they existed. I saw people talking about it on Facebook groups. Some swear by them. Others said they aren't needed. At the end of the day, is it needed? Can you still grow successful grass without a peptide? Yes, absolutely. Without a doubt, you can grow successful grass. I spent decade growing grass without peptides. The one unique advantage that you can use peptides in your scenario would be in an effort to mitigate the onset of stress. Remember that during a stressful period, your root system will shrink closer to the surface of the soil. And if you maintain the depth of that root system through that period, heat will cause that root system to shrink in a cool season grass. By maintaining root depth, you keep it in the cooler parts of the soil and you give it a competitive advantage to remain green and actively growing in a period otherwise where it would want to go dormant. And it normally wants to go dormant there because the root system sloughs and shrinks closer to the surface, where it's in warmer soil, has less access to water. However, if you manipulate the depth of the root system using a root promoting peptide, you can maintain the depth of that root into a cooler area, into an area that has a higher availability of water, because if it's really hot outside, it's the surface that's going to dry out first. The depth of the soil is where it will typically hold on to water longer because it's cooler there, and the evaporation rate is much lower. Therefore, if you can keep your root system alive there, and you do that through biostimulating, physically manipulating the root system of the plant, then you give it that much greater potential to survive through that period, to be able to eke out those extra 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks of color in the face of heat stress. So, can you do it without it? Yes. Does it give you a competitive advantage to do it with it? Yes, if used appropriately. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind, there are many different examples of peptides that are out there. As far as which ones have a physical effect on turf, that is the piece you have to understand. And the way you decipher which effect that is going to have on the turf is you have to know the source material and the extraction method. If it is going to be derived from animals, and it is derived through enzyme extraction, you're going to get a completely different set of peptide chains, because remember, peptides are a series of sequenced amino acids in a very specific sequence. And you only derive that specific sequence based on the enzyme you use to break apart the protein, right? So depending on where you're breaking apart that protein, you'll have a different sequence of amino acids. Therefore, the different peptide chain you have will determine which physical response it will elicit within the plant. Remember, a lot of times when you're dealing with peptides, you're actually dealing with genetic signals within the plant, not a hormonal signal within the plant. So you're working on different pathways there that have either higher risk or higher reward, whichever you choose based on the way at which you decide to use it. I'll give you an example. Animal-derived peptides derived through enzymatic hydrolysis oftentimes are phytotoxic to certain crops. That same peptide derived from vegetable sources through the same enzymatic hydrolysis process is going to be extremely beneficial to those exact same crops. Specifically, I'm talking about tomatoes. Animal-derived enzyme-extracted peptides from animals, it is a different peptide sequence, and it elicits phytotoxic effects and, in fact, keeps tomato plants from flowering. It'll yellow the leaves and keep them from flowering. If you were to derive it from soy and put it through an enzyme extraction process using an HA12 protease enzyme, then you will get a very specific peptide sequence known as the root-promoting peptide or lateral root-promoting peptide, however you want to call it. And all of a sudden, you have an increase in yield over an NPK control alone when used in combination with NPK. And at the end of the day, and this is the way I would summarize this, the way you maximize the benefit out of something like a peptide is you have your agronomy right first. If you do not have your agronomy right, you're not going to be able to reap the rewards of using something like a peptide or any biostimulant for that matter. So it doesn't matter which biostimulant you want to reach for. If you do not have the proper agronomy in place, none of it matters. It is all a moot point. It is all literally darts at a dartboard with your eyes closed, wondering how it will end up. I'll leave it at that. So, again, the big point there is dial in your NPK first, then go back, revisit your budget, and see where it would make sense. And this is how I like to describe it. When you are choosing to go after one of these products, where I would like to use it, if I know I've got a big summer marketing push coming up and I want to make sure my lawns are greener than my competitors, that is something I would spend the extra money to go in and have an additional set of performance inputs. I would have an extra benefit and extra color response and extra resistance to the onset of stress at my advantage, so that way when my marketing piece hits their mailbox or their front door or whatever the case may be, and the rest of the neighbors in the neighborhood are dormant and I'm still green, people will want to call me. So there we go. I've had fescue germinate and live on the side of a pine tree. There you go. I do not have a class, so unfortunately there's nothing I have to offer you to sign up for. So in the meantime, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. Again, we'll be back doing the same thing all over again. Also coming up, don't forget, I'm going to try to have the My Soil people on, and we'll talk about the ion exchange method and all that fun stuff. Y'all have a good day. We'll catch you on the flip side.